Hello, folks coming in. I see a few of you popping in on the screen. Feel free to be on camera or off camera, whatever you prefer. Anything is good. We're going to give it a couple minutes before we get started. So just if you want to drop your name in the chat, where you're coming from, what you're training for, if anything, kind of like what you're excited about, we'd love to hear from you while we're waiting for folks to join. Tampa, Florida. Awesome. Some in New Jersey, the New York City Marathon, awesome. Canada, training for New York, okay. Boston, Raleigh area, Richmond, okay. New York, a lot's coming in. Chapel Hill, Iowa, more coming in than I can keep up with. More Florida, St. George, Utah, awesome. Illinois, great. You all welcome everybody. It's so awesome to have you. I am going to give it just another minute because we still have some people coming in from the waiting room. St. Paul, Minnesota, Texas, more Texas. Sweet. Huntsville, Alabama. I have done some running in Huntsville. Super neat spot. Recovering, okay, from Iowa, hoping for 2026 racing. Ever the journey. Today's going to be a great session for you to hear. LA, San Francisco. Awesome. Okay, you all, it's 2:02, so I'm going to go ahead and kick us off here. I'm Ashley Arnold. I'm the run club lead here at 6 Minute Mile. A little bit about me. I've been a runner ever since high school and college. I went on to do some trail and ultra running, and am currently on my sort of comeback from having my second kiddo, who is 6 months old. So I will say the advice that Greg McMillan is going to go through today definitely is something that has saved me in that journey. It's really awesome to hear. And so I also want to say I see a few names coming in from people I chatted with via email. So it's great to see you all here. And I want to say to everyone who's joining, just a huge thank you for showing up and for your enthusiasm around this club. We had an overwhelming response to the email that we sent out last week about founding membership. Um, and in all truth, we read through every single message that you sent back to us. There were some incredible stories in there, some inspiring things about why you run, why you want to be a part of the club. So just thank you so much for sharing your stories. We're inspired by you. We're grateful that you're here. And we're really happy to have you a 6 Minute Mile subscriber. So we'll start with that. I'm going to get into some Run Club sort of specific stuff later about the offer for founding members and all of that. But before we do that, I want to shift the focus over to what you came here to learn about today as well. And that is how to think and train like a coach to make the most of your running. We're talking about one of the biggest mindset shifts that separates sort of just following a plan from actually training like an athlete and learning to think like a coach. So we're going to dig into how to adapt your training when life happens. And the person leading us through that today is the very amazing Coach Greg McMillan. Um, he's not just a world-class coach. Many of you probably know of him, heard of him, maybe you've trained with him or currently are. Runner's World at one point named him one of the best running coaches in America. It is definitely true. He's helped everyone from beginners to Olympians find that sweet spot between training hard and training smart. So great person to lead us through today. Then after his session, we'll open it up for some questions. And then I'll hop back in to talk about the 6 Minute Mile Run Club and kind of like your next steps for signing up as founding members. So awesome. All right, we're going to get started. And Greg, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Well, thank you, Ashley. Thanks everyone for joining. It's great to see where you're all from and what you're training for. Always fun to get a group of runners together, right? So we can share in our shared experience. As Ashley mentioned, I've been coaching for over 35 years. I've been so lucky to work with athletes that are just coming off the couch or from behind the computer, all the way up to national champions and Olympians. So kind of seen it all, done it myself as well. And what I wanted to share today is something that when a runner gets this, their training and racing takes off. Sometimes it takes a little bit of work, But once you get comfortable with this idea, what I find is your performance takes a big jumps forward and your injuries go way down. Most of us would agree that's what we really want out of our running is to get more for it from it and be able to become kind of a successful lifetime runner. And some of it comes down to how you think. And that's why I kind of divide it into the runner's brain and the coach's brain. So the runner's brain is really set up for success as a distance runner. I would ask you to raise your hand if any of these sound like you, but I know all of you are going to raise your hand. You're high achievers, you're disciplined, you're dedicated, you're determined. It's what everybody else admires about you. And you basically are so used to doing hard things that when the going gets tough, you look around and say, where did everybody go? Runners know how to get stuff done. That is kind of a core trait that we have. That's the runner's brain. That's what makes us successful. And that is a big benefit. That's where you stay in your routine, you get in your training, you overcome challenges that you're faced in your workouts, and you're able to go and succeed in your racing. That is the runner's brain, and that serves you very, very well most of the time. However, there are times when complications happen. We run into life. So, work challenges, stress, the weather, nutrition, hydration, you don't have a lot of time. There is a myriad of challenges. Ashley just mentioned she just had another baby 6 months ago. You can imagine she is sleep deprived. She is not optimally prepared for most of her runs, I'm sure. So that stuff always happens. I've coached Olympians, as I said. We never executed a training plan as we first built it because life gets in the way. We always have to address. So this is where the runner's brain starts to get challenged, is when life starts to happen. Because when that happens, you think like a runner. You think, well, this is on the schedule today. I need to get it in. I have to follow this training plan to a T. That's how the runner's brain thinks. Ashley, you can forward to the next one. The runner's brain says, it says this on the schedule. I have to do it. I'm going to get it in no matter what. It compartmentalizes. I don't care if I stayed up late because my baby was sick. I don't care if work was really stressful. I don't care if I didn't eat or if I'm dehydrated. I don't care if the weather isn't conducive to do this really important workout. I'm going to get it in. That's how the runner's brain thinks. I would ask you again to raise your hand if you think that way, but I bet you all do. Conversely, the coach's brain, when we see those complications, we want to possibly adjust the training to keep it optimal. So we're always saying, how are you feeling? Oh, let's modify this. Let's change this. Let's slow down a little bit. Let's run a little more or a little less. We're always wanting to massage the training so that it stays optimal. Because if you go out to do, say, a big important goal pace workout that's going to hopefully build your confidence towards your race, but it's compromised by all of these challenges, you're setting yourself up to not have an optimal performance. Then you don't get the benefit from the workout, you lose confidence. And as a coach, I want you to be as fit as possible and as confident as possible going into the race. So the coach's brain is always going to think, should we adjust? Should we figure out how you're feeling and make an adjustment? So on the next slide, you'll see I like to think of training in ranges. So I like to have a minimum for the day and a maximum for the day. And then you make the decision based on how you feel. I say, do you feel today like Kipchoge, who you see on the screen here? You feel like $1 million. You feel like you can fly. There's no fatigue. You're ready to tackle the world. Or do you feel like Eeyore, where, boy, I do not feel good today. I wish I did, but I don't. So what I like to teach runners is think about which runner showed up today for that run and then adjust the training to keep it optimal. So optimal training for a lot of our runner brain thinks, well, if I do farther and faster, that's better than slower and shorter. But actually, if you're Eeyore, slower and shorter on that day is optimal training. It's actually better training than farther and faster. It's kind of doesn't compute for the runner's brain a lot, but for the coach's brain, that's what we see as keeping your training optimal. So if you show up for the day, you feel like Kipchoge, then yes, the high end of the range, the faster end, that's optimal training for you. But you also have to get comfortable with if you don't feel like Kipchoge, you feel more like Eeyore, then you should modify your training, do the minimum for the day, the shortest distance, the slowest pace. That's optimal for you. Now, that is a struggle for the runner's brain. We are used to it's Tuesday. This is what my training schedule says. I'm going to do this workout. But as a coach, we say, hold on. Are we setting ourselves up for a positive experience or a negative experience? And what impact does this have on future training? That's a big shift for a lot of runners because we usually come into training as a new runner thinking, this is what the schedule says, I must do it as it says. But coaches, we are always changing workouts. I mentioned it earlier. Any Olympian I've coached, we never ever complete the training cycle exactly as I wrote it. We're always modifying it. And a lot of times it comes down to just moving things around. That's why I like to say drag and drop is the runner's best friend in your training calendar. So you should feel empowered to move the days of your runs, the workouts around in your in your weekly training. Set yourself up for success. If you know already that you've got an important run to do, but you also know it's going to be a stressful day, it's going to be compromised in some way, then just move that run. Move it to a better day. Move it to the next day or one before. Weather is a thing I adjust for a lot, right? If you have a big workout, do it on the best weather day of the week. Move things around. The training schedule is not set in stone. You've probably heard that a million times. But I really encourage you to get comfortable with moving your workouts around in your training calendar. That way, the training plan will fit you instead of trying to force you to fit the training schedule. That's an important point. Your training plan should fit you. You shouldn't have to be forced to fit the training plan. Whenever you get it in sync with you, that's where you start to see things really get better and better. Obviously, there are rules we have to follow with shifting things around. You obviously don't want to put a really hard run and a long run back to back, some of those things. But that's usually not the issue with runners. Usually the issue is you're just so stubborn that you won't move a run to another day, shift things around. And I encourage you to start getting more and more comfortable with that. Again, thinking with your coach's brain instead of just your running brain. Next slide there, Ashley. The other thing that when you begin to do this, and then you start to take better care of your body, you can start to interrupt the injury cycle. So this is the other thing I've had a lot of success with my runners is understanding the injury cycle in runners. I'd ask you to raise your hand if you've ever been injured, but most of you are going to raise your hand because that's the nature of what we do. But this is the cycle that happens for an injury. First, there is tightness in the body, and typically that's the body trying to protect the area that is being abused by your running. Repetitive motion injuries start typically with tightness. Then, if you ignore it, which is what most of us do, that tightness suddenly becomes an ache and then a pain. Raise your hand if you've experienced that. You've kind of, oh, wow, my hamstring's starting. I feel it a little bit. Oh, now I feel it more. I'm still going to ignore it because I want to get my run in. Oh, now it's starting to get worse and worse. And now I have a full-blown injury. So again, empowering you to realize that we can break this injury cycle. It's possible to do that. It starts with understanding this flow. And if we can interrupt this flow, it makes a big difference. The way I encourage runners to do it is to preemptively take down weeks in your training. So a down week, some people call it a deload week, is where you reduce your training volume by 15 to 25%. So a 15 to 25% reduction in your weekly volume or mileage. That is what I call a down week. I pre-schedule those every third or fourth week. I like it every fourth week unless you're injury prone, then do it every third week. But just doing that allows your body to recover because it's your body that gets injured, right? Your cardiovascular system is very robust. It does not get injured. It's your musculoskeletal system. So by introducing these little periods of down weeks, it allows that body to catch up. When you start implementing these in your training, it can make a big difference in keeping injuries at bay. The other thing, of course, is your strength, your core, your mobility. You probably saw the strength program that Ashley put together. It was in a recent newsletter, and it's on the 6 Minute Mile website. A little goes a long way for runners. If you can just commit to doing a little bit of this, you don't have to do a full-blown hours-long session of strength or core mobility. It can make a big difference. And the mobility is really interesting. This isn't for stretching to improve your flexibility. This is to find those tight areas before they become an ache or a pain. That's why I like people to do mobility. And mobility usually means gentle movements with your body. You might have heard it called rope stretching or active isolated flexibility. That's what you see the pros. They often have the ropes. Meb Keflezighi had a lot of videos when he was doing the rope stretching after his runs. I like athletes to do that as a way to find those tight areas before they become an ache or a pain. Because you don't feel the tight areas until you do mobility. So it's very interesting a way, it's an interesting way to kind of self-diagnose before you have the aches or the pains. So if you do these things, if you'll preemptively take a down week, if you'll include at least a little bit of your ancillary, these strength core mobility routines, you can become a runner that nips these in the bud. Because if you look back at your training, I guarantee you, you would have traded, oh, I'll miss a run or two or three. I'll run less. I'll skip this big workout or this long run to have stayed healthy. You easily would have done that. So that's a big mind shift that the runner's brain has to make is like something's going on. I need to make an adjustment. I need to stop this now so that it doesn't linger or become something where I have a big interruption. And that's what happens when you begin to think like a coach. You get rid of those big interruptions in your training. We've all been there where we're training great, everything's going well, we're so excited, and then we have an interruption. We get injured. Something happens where we have to interrupt our training flow. That is a big negative. If you can remove that, you will see big improvements in your running. Also, what happens is you start to have more positive and successful workouts because you're not compromised going into those workouts. For my athletes, if they have a goal pace workout, which is a really important workout, I say those are sacred workouts. We can only do those if everything is good. We don't want to set ourselves up for a bad goal pace workout. So those are ones we have to move around. If the weather's going to be bad, move it to a different day. If you're going to be stressed, move it to a different day. Find a day where it will be more successful. So all of a sudden, you start having more successful workout after another successful work, and then another successful workout. You start stacking these successful weeks together. You don't have to do that for very long to where you see a big fitness boost and you see a big confidence boost. If you've ever had the race of your life, it usually comes after you've stacked a bunch of good weeks together and you feel really confident for the race. That's the cycle we want to get into is having positive week after positive week, stacking those together because it leads to super high confidence on race day. If you're confident on race day, if you're excited to get out there and challenge yourself, you really set yourself up for big success on race day. That's how a coach thinks. A coach thinks, let's modify when we need to modify. Let's be disciplined and driven and all the qualities you have most of the time. But when complications happen, let's start to be smart and modify. Those modifications will lead to you becoming the runner you want to be, having a lifelong running career where you're able to enjoy running cycle after cycle, year after year. That's what the successful athletes do. Okay, Ashley. So that's kind of what I wanted to pass along was this idea of this slight modification in how you think can make a big difference. But I know there were a lot of questions that came through. So maybe let's just start with some questions. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's awesome. And I want to say thank you, Greg, because as much as we've gone through this, hearing this again from you just reminds me again, oh yeah, I gotta think about this all the time. It's so easy to fall back into this pattern of, oh, I gotta run 8 miles today, and if I don't do my 8 miles in my strides, like there's gonna be problems. So it's really great to like reiterate this information over and over. And I just want to call out, I saw some things in the chat, like someone working 12-hour night shifts, 10-week-old baby, like knee injuries, meniscus pain, Achilles, foot pain, IT band syndrome. There's a lot in there. So yeah, let's open it up for questions. And two ways to do this. One, like you can go ahead and raise your hand. We'll call on you. I'm going to stop sharing. So if you want to be on camera, you can. We can kind of see everyone and we'll come back into the presentation in a minute. If you don't want to come off of mute, you can also put things in the chat. We'll be pulling from there as well.
I'll start, Ashley. I want to answer one from Don. He says, how do you stack weeks while also taking a deload week? It's a great question. So what we're trying to do is stack successful weeks. So a deload week is a successful week in your training because it's allowing your body to recover. So it's not always that you're doing the most training. It is what is optimal, a successful week for you in that. So for me, if a runner every third or fourth week takes a deload week, a down week, that to me is a successful week that we are stacking together.
Okay, I see a couple hand raised, so we'll go with Micah.
Hey, question. I saw in the chat some things about stress fractures. I'm dealing with a sacral fracture that I got, and there was nothing to let me know that it was coming. Like I didn't have anything happen. I was in a taper week before a marathon and seized up, and just curious about how, if you're feeling good, is there a way to just, avoid those things you just don't know are coming, or is that just like table stakes?
Yeah, I feel really bad for you because there's nothing worse than being ready for a race and something happens right before it. We've all had that step off a curb and twist our ankle a few days before. Unfortunately, in your situation, it sounds like just kind of bad luck, right? You're doing everything right and something just happens. Now, you can obviously go back through your training, back through how you were feeling. I like to do that with athletes when something happens. Go back and circle anything in red, like this was something I felt, or this was compromised, or this felt weird in a certain way, and see if you can start deducing, did it come from before, or was it just something weird? Usually in the taper, that's where the body starts to feel better. It starts to
Hmm.
heal up from the training. So I'm really sorry to hear that that happened to you.
Mindy, I see your hand up, but I want to call out one in the chat and then we're going to come to you next. So I have a question here from Amy. I'm approaching 60. How do you feel about a 10-day training cycle versus a 7-day typical cycle? And Keith in here also, who's 40, says, I would like to know about that too. I
Yeah,
could say
that's a
number
really
three, I'd like to know.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So in training, you have stress and then you have recovery, right? And that's the dance of training is you stress it and you allow it to recover. This recovery rate varies by runner and it tends to decrease. It gets slower as we age. So you have stress and you have recovery. So what a lot of older runners find is that if they add more recovery after the stress, they're able to keep training as they like. They avoid overtraining or under recovery. So the 10-day cycle essentially spreads the stress out. It provides more recovery in between. And one of the challenges for the aging runner is figuring out how much recovery do you need after workouts. And somewhat that is an experiment of one. Some older runners recover pretty fast from workouts, and some take longer. Some recover pretty fast from certain types of workouts. So they might do a tempo run, say a moderate effort, 20 to 40-minute run. They recover fast from that. But if they do a speed workout, it takes them 2 or 3 days. So this is again where the coach's brain is very helpful with something like a 10-day cycle because you're recognizing I need a little bit more recovery between those sessions. To me, obviously, I'm like, thumbs up. Yes. Again, that is the training program fitting you instead of you trying to force yourself into a different training program. So the 7-day cycle kind of fits our week, right? Our calendar. But a lot of people begin to modify that to 10 days or 14 days. There's lots of different variations. I definitely encourage you to experiment with that because it can be a way so that you stay healthy and you're having really high quality workouts.
Awesome, Mindy. Well, kick it over to you.
Yeah, just a question on, life gets in the way, and we have, like, for me, for example, I have an 11-mile run tomorrow that's easy with strides, and then a 20-mile on Saturday. But work is going to get in the way tomorrow morning, and I have to be logged on earlier than I would anticipate. So I'm in a 50-mile week now. Next week, I increase again because I had a deload last week. So I know it's kind of dangerous to increase your mileage too quickly. So if I would cut that 11, is it safe to progress the following week? So when you have to make those choices, like, how would you do that?
Yeah, great question and common question, right? So in my book, I would modify the 11-mile run, right? I'd make that fit into whatever time availability you have. Call that good because the long run is probably more important than your 11-mile run. So you're prioritizing the more important run, you're decreasing the other. Then for the next week, you might drop back slightly on that mileage goal. So you aren't making a big jump. Now, you're probably fine to make that big jump. You're ready
Mm.
for it. But just to be safe, you might give yourself a range. I like ranges with everything. So again, you can modify based on how you're feeling. So what did you say next week's mileage was supposed to be?
54. That's my peak week.
54. So for me, that might be more like 50 to 54. And you make that decision based on how you feel during the week. That way you can kind of make sure your stress stays appropriate. And of course, you can do all the things like ramping up nutrition and rest and hydration and happy thoughts and all those things to recover as well. But it's a perfect example of if you use that as your coach's brain is going to tell you to modify a little bit, isn't it? And that's going to keep
Mhm.
you healthy, decrease your risk of interrupting your training, particularly as you're moving toward your peak training.
Awesome. Thank you.
You bet.
Great question, Mindy. Rachel, I see you. You've come back with your hand raised, so let's pass it over to you.
Okay, great. Thank you. So obviously, when you're training and you have a big, goal for a training run, you said you could maybe look at the weather for the week, make sure you've got a day where it hopefully complements your goal, weather-wise. But sometimes for a race, you don't get to pick your weather. And I'm wondering what your thoughts are in terms of, making sure you've got kind of the mental preparation for tough weather days. I'm specifically thinking I've got a race in 2 days in Toronto, and while the low is usually 41 and the high is 61, we're looking at like 65 in the morning with rain throughout the race and stiff winds. So, any advice you can give on kind of how to build that mental toughness for race day?
Yeah, I ran the Berlin Marathon, which is normally
Mm,
flat and fast and cool and perfect, and it was almost 80 degrees that day. So a lot of what the group I was with, we had like 600 runners in that race, we were talking about, man, we are gonna have to adjust our expectations for that day. I think that's the real key, is just being honest with the fact that the weather is not going to be conducive. You are going to have to adjust your expectations for pace. But that does not mean that you cannot have a great positive race. It just shifts your focus from the watch to more your feeling that you can run your best on the day. If it's going to be hot, you slow down a little bit. You learn that you can get through that race, live to fight another day. If it's windy, your challenge is, can I get through these windy parts, giving them out just the right amount of effort so that I have enough to finish the race strong. So you begin to shift from our more time-focused strategy that we have for most races, and you move more into what will make this a successful day. That's what I had to do in Berlin. I had to slow down a lot. I had to slow through those aid stations and really make sure I was hydrating, dumping fluids on my head to stay cool. That changed from a watch-based race to more of my effort-based race. Ashley can probably identify. She's an ultra runner. Ultra runners have to do that all the time because of the terrain and the conditions they run in. So maybe your challenge is to get comfortable with what would make a successful day for me in those conditions.
I'm going to jump to a question from the chat here. I think this is something that we've probably all thought about. How do you adjust training if and when illness occurs? This question is from Justin. Let's say we get a cold the week before a race. It sounds like you got a cold the week before Berlin last month. So while you were already tapering, you just weren't sure how to adjust. So kind of what would be your advice there, Greg?
Yeah, illness is really interesting. So if it occurs in training, it's a little bit easier, right? You just have to respect that you're ill and you have to reduce your training load until your body begins to feel better. Because obviously, illness is a stress. So if you have an illness stress and you stack on top of it your training stress, you're no longer giving your body a chance to recover. Now, after you start to feel better, easy running is actually really good for an illness because it stimulates your immune system to build stronger, helps you feel better. But that initial period where you're not feeling well, you really do have to reduce your training load, just respecting that your body is already dealing with some stress. Again, the runner's brain says that's not a problem. I don't mind you missing 2 or 3 runs. I don't mind you reducing those runs to be very, very short. I don't mind that at all because I'm looking at the bigger picture. I'd rather you get over the illness so we can get back to good training as opposed to overstressing yourself and having it linger. Before a race is more challenging, right? That's where you do have to play it by ear. And almost like we were saying in Rachel's question, you need to have a modification based on how you feel on that day. So if you still feel ill, you better slow down. You better have some contingency plans because you don't want to hurt yourself in that race. You don't want to end up in the medical tent at mile 14 for 2 hours while your family's freaking out trying to get to you. So you want to make sure you're making those modifications. But during training, I just encourage you again to kind of change your brain a little bit and say, I don't mind if I miss a few days because I'm ill. I'm going to feel better and I can get back to training, and that's how I'm going to keep my training on track.
Keith, I saw you pointing to yourself. You did that. You had your family waiting for you when you were sick at the
Yeah, yeah. Apparently,
mid-trip.
in the London Marathon, they project and tell your family when you're going to hit a mile marker. But then I didn't hit that mile marker, and I actually regressed on the app. And where I was like, "You must be dead." And sure enough, I tried to run on the flu. So I would not recommend that.
Yeah.
Despite losing a lot of body weight, I thought I could not fly that day. So Greg, I had a question for you, and thank you so much for your training programs. I'm following your New York one right now. I love
Excellent.
it. One of and I especially love that you've put a lot of hills in it for New York, so I feel strong for that. One thing is though, and I'm sure this relates with a lot of folks on the call, is we all grab our programs off the internet or wherever, right? And the first week says X number of miles, 10, 20, 30, whatever it is, right? And I love running. I train all year round, but I'm not at marathon caliber or half marathon caliber all year round. So let's pretend the first week in the program is 30 miles and I may be at 20 miles currently. What I do is I bump out the training program and I try and compound 7-ish% per week. So I may start my training for New York. I started it like 22 weeks out. Here it is though. I'm 3 weeks into it, and I'm just sick of running, and I love running. Like I put on a shirt not because of 6 minute mile. I'm just wearing running gear. Like I love running, but I'm kind of like. So I think what I'm getting to is like, what do you recommend for athletes to build up to where they're capable of the plan that they want to do, in such a way that they don't get hurt, but then also somehow box it in a way where they don't get to like this near to the near. I've got 1 week left to taper, and I'm fed up with running. So like. What do you think there?
Yeah, it's kind of it's a traditional problem that we've had, right? Where marathon training is a grind anyway, just because you're getting ready for a very arduous distance and takes a lot of time commitment and all of the things that go into marathon training. So one of the things we try to do from cycle to cycle is we try to reduce the length of the marathon specific training so you don't run into the mental fatigue, the stress, the I'm just sick of this. I just want the race to be over. Because that's not exactly the optimal performance mindset, is it? You kind of want to be excited for this thing that's coming up. So I would say in the future, what we would do is we would try to reduce that marathon specific phase a bit so we don't run into that, which of course means we have to do more preparation to get ready. So when you're coming into the marathon cycle, you're a little bit already ready for it. And that can be a challenge, like you say, if you've taken this recovery time, now you're building up. You've got to figure out how to structure that. I like to stack different kind of phases of training, and sometimes that'll help a runner come into their race specific block, like your marathon cycle, ready so it's not such a big jump, and then that it's a smoother increase in training. And then, like I said, if we can shorten it a little bit, then probably like you felt 3 or 4 weeks ago, where you're really fired up for training, that's where you're hitting the peaking phase in the race. So we want to shift our training so that matches for race day. It's just a bit of modification and manipulation, but it's smart not to take a big jump from, low training to high training. So we just have to kind of prepare for that. I like to do it by stacking these, I call them preparatory phases, so that you're getting ready for your marathon or race specific phase.
Thank you so much. And you
Yeah.
called it. I PR'd 4 weeks ago, and now I'm like just done.
Yeah. Well, I would tell you, so the big battle right now is mental. So you have to try to find some headspace that gets you excited about the race. So whatever that may be, it's probably not in training, it's probably in your own head or watching inspiring videos or whatever it needs to be. You've got to sort of take it down physically and then think about your mind, get excited, maybe being grateful, maybe whatever works for you, but get in that mindset because the marathon's hard enough. You want to make sure you're going into it at least having some sort of, you know, mantra or way to refocus your brain if you start to have a pity party or think in a way that is not optimal for you.
This is sort of a small thing too. But just throwing it out there, smiling whenever you're feeling unmotivated or it's tough. Like studies show if you smile and relax your face, like that truly helps your performance improve. Um, Definitely find those lack of motivation spots during ultra training. It's like, why? Like, why would you run this much? It's so stupid. And like, you should just go home. This is so, all those moments. And so, just think, okay, I'm just gonna smile. And the mantra thing, those two things, Greg, have helped me tremendously. So, man, the doldrums of the end of training, Keith, it's real. So real.
But you can overcome it. So that's the thing. Don't live in
Yep.
that.
Yep, you can totally
Start to
overcome it.
figure out how to come out of that in some way that builds.
And
Today I
smile.
did my recovery on the trail, and I found that to just
Yeah.
switching to the environment made me so
Yeah.
happy today when to come in.
Anything that gets you in the right mindset.
Okay, so there's a lot of comments coming in the chat. Being mindful of time. I also just want to call out, we're not going to be able to answer every single question just in the time that we have and the questions that are here. So we're going to keep these questions and we will follow up with you so we get all the questions answered, okay? But I do want to call out Greg, Dean, you put something in here around long COVID and having COVID and the motivation and like feeling really hard to keep moving. You've had that. Um, and asking if anybody else has dealt with that. So I just want to call out Greg's comment. So if anyone else in the call has had long COVID or dealt with pulmonary issues related, to respond to Greg. And Coach Greg McMillan, if you have any experience with athletes you've coached who've gone through long COVID, just anything you want to share around that could be really helpful.
Yeah, it's really tough, right? Because you're ready to do your training and your body is just saying, I don't think so, buddy. So it really takes, talk about changing the runner's brain. You have to take it way down a notch, work within what your body is giving you. I've had runners that were very competitive runners, fast runners. We've had to go down to run walk, mostly walking, little bits of running, very low volume just to at least be out there moving, waiting for the body to feel better, hoping it will begin to feel better. It is really frustrating for runners when you're ready to do your training, your body will not do it. So I think I definitely respect the mental challenge that'll be. And I would say just bring your training down to whatever is accomplishable, whatever you can get in, and that is success. And keep doing that as much as you can. For the most part, long COVID suddenly goes away for a lot of people. So that's what we're going to be hoping for. But you want to be ready for when that happens. You don't want to be fighting against it. You want to be almost preparing for it with some consistency. But certainly my heart goes out to you because I know that's a real tough thing for sure.
Thanks for that answer, Greg. We have time for one more question here. There's one in the chat from David Tessler. This I think is probably relevant for a lot of folks with marathons coming up, um, who may not have gotten in all of the training that they wanted to get in as life adjustments happen. So you're asking how critical is the 20 miler before a race? I ran two 16 milers and then an 18 miler 2 weeks ago, but pulled a tendon this past Sunday and thinking of resting it to be okay for the New York Marathon in 2 weeks.
Yeah, definitely rest, as you would imagine. I'm going to say respect that your body needs some recovery. Don't worry about the lack of certain long runs. If you've stacked successful weeks, that is like it's equivalent to getting that one long run in, right? So it's more that you've gotten all of these weeks in than it is that you got that one long run or the longest long run in. So you have to kind of go back and you have this well of strength that came from all of these other runs that is there kind of in place of that 20 miler. So I wouldn't worry so much about it, even though our runner's brain wants us to, right? Because that's on the schedule. We know that's part of getting ready for a marathon is doing these long runs. But you have to kind of think back to all of the other successful runs you've had. You've had a lot of those going into the race. That will serve you well on race day. One of the things I have all of my athletes do is as they're getting close to a race. So Keith, this will be good for you as well. Think back across your training that you did for this race and write down the three, four, or five runs that you are really proud of yourself for. That could be one where you ran farther and faster than you ever have. It could be one where you really, really, really didn't want to get out the door and go run, but you did. So you're proud of yourself for that. Or it could be even one of those real stinkers where it just, you felt horrible, you didn't want to do it, but you got your workout in, you pushed through, you persevered, you proved to yourself you can do it even when you're having a pity party. Those things, start reading those as you get closer to a race. That will remind you of the positive. That'll show you, wow, yeah, I did do a lot of good things. I did a lot of stuff I'm proud of, instead of worrying about the one, two, or three things that didn't go as well. I call it your awesomeness list. I'm not sure if awesomeness is even a word, but that's what I call it. But it's really good for you to write down because as you get close to a race, your brain kind of freaks out, right? It starts to go crazy and you think a lot about negative stuff. So I would encourage you, David, take that rest, get the body healthy, but then just remind yourself, I got all this training in me. Race day is magical. There's a lot of people. You bring your A game, you can get it done.
All right, we're going to take two more questions because there's one here around Sam, you asked, I've heard peers say there's no such thing as overtraining, just under recovering, particularly as it relates to strength.
Yeah,
What is
I'll
your
add
take on
to
that?
that.
Cool.
I know that's very, counterintuitive to the nature of this conversation and how it's progressing so far. So I really want to hear that. And more specifically, what are your tips for um, sort of over indexing on recovering.
Uh, can you explain it again? Too much recovery? Is that what you mean?
No, not necessarily too much. Just what are your what tips do you have for recovering as smartly as possible? Like, mobility was one example that you mentioned, but hydration, macros, etc.
Oh yeah. So the stress rest cycle we talked about a little bit earlier, you stress the body, then you have to recover. The recovery is where all the benefits come from. We just stress the body so we can do the recovery part. So you should definitely be building a recovery protocol. When I worked with the Olympians, we always had a rule. You had to have your post-workout shake with you at all times because you need to get that fluids and fuel back in you immediately after those workouts. So that's pre-planning to have that. We would always do the mobility work. We would always make sure within the first 2 hours after a long and or hard workout, we were having a really good meal and rehydrating. That works for regular runs too, but especially for those harder runs. Focus a lot on recovery. We talked about mobility. There's yoga. There's a lot of meditation. There's just resting, taking naps. Anything you can do to accelerate your recovery is super beneficial. And the nice thing about the body is it will tell you if it's recovered or not when you go for the next run, right? It will quickly say, I feel better or I feel worse. And so if you listen to that, you'll know, okay, I need to modify my recovery. I need to ramp it up as much as possible. Most of the professional athletes today, if you see any of their Instagram stuff, they spend as much time not running training than they do running training because they are focused on recovery, nutrition, hydration, mental, resting, all of that is super important. So the more you can kind of have a routine or a protocol, the better. And definitely the hydration, nutrition, mobility, and rest are very important.
Thank you. That's awesome advice. Really
Okay,
glad to hear.
thank you.
Okay, I'm going to pull a last question from the chat unless anyone else wants to come off of mute and raise their hand for a question. Okay, there's one in here around IT band syndrome and bike workouts from Veronica. If you're dealing with something like that and a stress fracture, man, hang in there, Veronica. What do you think about stationary bike workouts?
Yeah, I think anything that doesn't aggravate the injury, but allows it to heal faster and maintain your fitness I'm all for that. Now, sometimes our runner's brain causes us problems when we have an injury and we move to cross training. We cross train like a maniac. We try to make up for the lack of running by going absolutely crazy. And then you're not allowing the body the energy resources to heal. So it is a balance, but I always say anything that you can do that allows you to accelerate the healing, to complement the healing of the body is fantastic. Just make sure you don't overdo it. And as a result, you're compromising the body's ability to heal itself. It will heal itself. We've all been injured and we've all been not injured after an injury. So it will heal itself. You want to give yourself the best opportunity. And then hopefully you can move from cycling to walking or the elliptical, and then finally, into actual running. It just be a gradual return to running process for you.
Really great questions, you all, and great conversation in the chat. Thank you, everyone, for getting in there and responding to other members here. I'm going to jump back in and share my screen again, here to go through some 6 Minute Mile Run Club information. So what is the 6 Minute Mile Run Club all about, and how do I join? I also just want to say a lot of what's going on here too, just the camaraderie, the support, the accountability. That's a lot of what you're going to find within the club. In addition to at the core, getting training delivered from Greg McMillan himself, like a human coach, the best of the best. I know I've already introduced him at the beginning, but I'm just going to put this slide here because he has just such a wealth of experience and knowledge. and is so eager and willing to share that with athletes. So really exciting. The core of the Run Club is training delivered by Greg himself. In addition to that support, of course, it is like all about this community of real runners, and then just this idea that running is better together. So what you're going to have as part of the club, we're going to have 12 or more webinars each year. So that's at least one live webinar each month. That's where we have experts, we have coaches, PTs, nutritionists, pro athletes, and more, where we get online, we go through some learning together, we ask questions. We can all really have time together learning and growing as runners. Um, Along with that coaching from Greg, there's over 1,000 training plans that you can choose from that can really be personalized to your goal. And then there's that community support piece with Greg and his team whenever you need it. It's the same price as a standard plan, but there's like a lot more that goes into this. And so what that means as a member, we have these live interactive sessions, like I said, 12 of them each year. We're going to be doing monthly gear giveaways, and then there's testing opportunities for members, which is really exciting. Opportunities to try new products and really see what works. We also have VIP race access, so race entries, bib opportunities for races that may already be sold out, which is really exciting. And then we're also going to have in real life meetups, which is super cool. Time to run together in person at races and just bring the community from all over the country together in one place. It is, we can really find ways to run together and find camaraderie, even if we are in Boston and LA. It's really great to have other runners to just talk to and be able to think through motivation, think through injuries, think through like the great days, the bad ones, and all of that in between, and kind of just like geek out about running in a really safe space where maybe our spouse or someone else doesn't necessarily want to hear about our long run. And so for that, we have this awesome private forum we'll have in Facebook, and again, that direct coach messaging. So we can talk about running as much as we want for as long as we want all the time. And then we'll also have milestone merch. So when you have birthdays, when you reach really cool moments and rewards for doing that. So just acknowledging like, hey, you're out there, you're doing it, it's hard work. And to feel really good and to help when you give yourself a pat on the back, that we can give it to you too, when you're going through those days. And so what we have here, we have a QR code. Nobody else has this yet. The Run Club moving forward, we have $39.99 a month for the Run Club for founding members. The first 30 days, we have a free trial. And within that, we will also reach out to you and ask for some feedback. Would love your feedback on shaping this in the future, like what's great, what's working well, what do you want to see more of? Your voice really matters to us, and we would love to hear more from you on that. So if you want to scan the QR code here, you'll have that link. And I'll also follow up with the recording of this call. Someone asked earlier if some of the slides would be in there. Yeah, the whole call will be in there. So you can get this from that as you can get this link there as well. And for the first 10 people who sign up to be a part of the club, we are going to be sending a really cool package with some really awesome gear. So just know that will be coming if you're an early sign upper. So really appreciate all of you joining us today. Thank you for the time and for your enthusiasm and excitement. And I can't wait to welcome you all into the club. So awesome. If there are any final questions about this, we can hang on for a couple minutes if you have any questions around the club or any immediate thoughts. Happy to field some of those. Okay. Well, it's great to see so many faces and to see some faces and connect them to some emails that we got today. All right, you
Thanks,
all.
everybody. Good luck with your training.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Thank you.